have to tell you that I've been getting bored with some of the podcasts I've been listening to. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of them right now. Like
Are you podcasted out even though you have one?
Yes. But then I go to music. I'm tired of my music. I don't know what to listen
feeling
to.
A little flat.
I've had a rare few like quiet drives.
Oh, you know what? Every once in a while, when I can't find my thing either, I almost angrily just push the power button, like boom, because I just need to be quiet. Yeah. And I'm like, that's what I needed.
I know. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any idea how I found this podcast, but I've been listening. I might say my state of mind. Actually, I'm going to say it's the state of mind of a lot of the people I know. But I've been listening to this one called The Anxious Achiever. Yeah,
you sent me that one. That's the only one I listened to the past 2 weeks was that episode.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it?
Yeah,
He described things well. So there's been a lot of people, anxiety is talked about a lot right now. So, but I like the way that she talks about it in the workplace specifically. But man, by the way, yesterday I heard one about a guy who went to the very top of Google. Oof. And he is not at Google anymore, but he talks about how his anxiety was through the roof there, but he didn't even know what was happening to him. It was so stressful to work there.
I listened to that episode and I thought the same thing. I think every friend conversation I've had this week, because I was taking note of this yesterday, has been around like the vibe and the mood of people has been kind of down. And everyone I talked to had that sense of like overwhelm, not burnout, but more like overwhelmed, tired, exhausted. And obviously this has been going on for a while, but I was kind of thinking like, where is it coming from? I think it's because COVID revealed it. Like, I think we were all running way too fast as a American culture. And like all workplaces want more. So it's just like a systemic thing. Like we're all running faster. And then COVID like highlighted it with a big ass highlighter. I think that's what happened. That's my current theory. Because I'm like, why is it suddenly
changed? Something changed so drastically in the mood of so many things.
Yeah. Because why? It's not like we weren't burnt out 3 years ago and now we are. No. But there's something about this suddenly we're all realizing how tired we are. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't think of anything else that is causing that other than like
the
we
realization.
Noticed. I know. We noticed it.
I've been on that note too. I've been listening to following some TikToks around. I like to watch some educators and teachers. So I watched one from a college professor recently because I love laughing at the middle school and high school ones where they're like, literally my students come in and they're like, so are we going to learn something today? Yeah. Like my point there is the I don't care also. The I don't care and I'm tired mentality is through the roof. Like I'm telling you, they were sharing that they just feel like their students just feel like they don't.
And where did that come from?
They just don't care.
I have an ongoing rant with a friend, Zach.
Or they care about completely different things. So I should not say that they don't care.
And so my first thought is, Gen Z kind of just started coming into the workforce a few years ago. So that also makes sense. If that's their attitude and that's like just new in the workplace, that could be why. But no, it's not just Gen Z feeling that way. Like me and my friend have this rant going on about any kind of like his this week was about an insurance claim issue with like the lab.
You said to say insurance and I'm already like
and mine was
sad.
Like scheduling a haircut and then, a car appointment. And it seems like all of these places, it's so blanket statement, but like the workers just don't care.
Yeah.
They actually don't do any work to help you. They're just like, sorry, sucks to be you. And you're like,
wait,
where did that come from? Is that the same thing? They're not Gen Z.
I don't know. But it's making me, having a middle schooler, I've been looking at some of these, it's just like amazing. The students, even that they're, I don't know, the world is changing.
We're all feeling it. Okay, so a couple serious like angles of that.
Sure.
You were thinking about the tone that leader sets. I've actually been thinking how it is challenging for leaders when it's this discouraging to like still show up and lead
tone?
well.
Well, I was thinking, there was an episode on The Anxious Achiever that was talking about tone, which made me start thinking about when you're a leader, are you thinking about the tone that you're leaving? Like, I think that sometimes if you're frantic, your people start to feel frantic.
Yeah.
If you're too calm, your people, it's like, but then I was also thinking, what is my tone?
Yeah.
What tone do I leave when I leave a room? What tone do I leave in my house? And also I started to think, whose tone do I really appreciate?
Well, what is the tone I have?
I know.
I mean, I
just started thinking about tone. Sorry, I just went on a tone rant.
I think it's great. I've been thinking about the same thing because I struggle personally with what's the right balance of authenticity and like forcing a different tone.
I agree.
Because I notice sometimes when I am not setting a good tone as a leader, but it's because I'm trying to be real about how I'm feeling right now versus like maybe putting on a different hat and like showing up a different way that's different than how you feel. Is that being inauthentic? Is that leading well? Where does that line happen?
Right.
Because you're right. So many leaders they're also burnout, to stick on this topic.
Yeah.
And then they're showing up that way though, which doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. And I do think that the leader needs to push their tone a little bit towards what the team needs from them.
Yeah. I agree.
With some authenticity?
With authenticity. I agree. I think it's a both and. And that's hard to do. And that's the point. It should be hard. Leadership is hard.
It is hard.
But
my husband says I'm the tone setter of the house.
Yeah. Is that just news to you now?
But I was like curious in your house. Like
yeah, it's more Ashley than me.
Okay, gotcha.
It can kind of depend for us.
Okay.
It can depend on the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think about that sometimes. I think, ooh, watch it sometimes, they don't like tailspin the whole house if you're not in a good place.
Yeah. It's a good thing. And I thought related to that, because it's come up in a few different coaching conversations where I'm coaching a leader, meaning like somebody more senior in an organization, and they're going on and on about just like how much stuff they have going on, and then people need so much more from them. And I've been saying to them to kind of encourage and comfort them, like most people, meaning the people working for them, under them, do not at all recognize the energy spent by a leader. And I say it that way because I didn't realize until I started getting in leadership roles. And I was like, holy crap, like the amount of energy that you have to spend as a leader in your role can be like 100x the person below you, and they think that your day is just like theirs.
It's not.
And you're just going, oh my gosh. And you also still need 10 more things for me. And like, I keep hearing this in sessions. And again, it gets me stuck in the same place. Like, so yeah, what do they do about that? It's tricky because they are in the leadership role. And so there's a reason you're paid more and you have that title.
Well, the guy from Google that I was listening to, he now coaches leaders because he hit absolutely the rock bottom. He was managing an org of 1,000 people. He was like, of course, this is no surprise that he's going to say, you got to take care of yourself first.
Yeah. And I think what I'm learning in this and with those people in the coaching sessions is the whole just verbalizing and being honest about where you are, communicating. Like, how often do we see in organizations where the leader never communicates what's going on, what they're experiencing, and what they're, not even their feelings, just what they're working on, what's going on. Yeah. It never really gets talked about. So of course people don't know how much they have going on. Yeah. And then they start complaining, it's like, my leader's been absent or something. Like, well, if you knew what they had going on, you might think differently. It's tricky. I want to just give a shout out here to wrap up this topic, because we've been hearing a lot in our in the comments on TikTok about, mainly coming from Gen Z, but from many people, saying that like the workplace right now is expecting them to wear way too many hats. And they actually have to do 2 jobs for the price of 1, or they have to wear like 10 hats in their role. And this is just not doable. And I don't know that I have anything to say except that like, I hear and get that. And I just want to acknowledge it as a podcast that talks about the workplace, because it is hard and it is getting more cramped. Like workplaces are getting squeezed from every side. And so they are asking more out of people, and people are also burnt out and tired and realizing that. So they're realizing how tired, whereas maybe 4 years ago, they would have just powered through. But it's tricky. It's tough. And I think it's happening everywhere right now.
I agree. Because there's not enough people too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I think the complaints are really strong language. I think people are really angry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to diminish that anger, but I do think if you have a healthy workplace, to create discussion around it is probably one of the healthiest things to do.
I agree.
I think some people in the comments though are like, not at healthy workplaces,
No.
so they can't even do that.
I hear that more often than I do healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just thought I'd do a quick personality chat with you around I was thinking about this because I had a bad weekend. Personalities and expectations of weekends.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man. I think different personalities have very clearly different expectations of weekends.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that, okay, if I'm thinking about relationships, I feel like in general, in my relationship, I would say that if we're ticking along in life normally, we get along fine on the weekends. But if we get along great during the week, but the weekend is when we fall apart.
Yeah. Because if it's anything like us, it's like vacations where we do it totally different.
We do it different.
And that's when it clashes. Whereas during the week, you're doing your own things at your own jobs.
Yes. I think I just wanted to just say it, that it's hard, that you got to communicate about your expectations of your weekends sometimes, because what one personality needs may be more downtime and lack of commitment to events versus someone who needs events quite whatever. It just causes, I like to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Like that to me is a fun weekend.
Yeah.
That's not fun to Adam.
Yeah. You make me think about a friend, because it's not only within the relationship, but also with friends.
Yeah.
Because a friend is a hardcore planner and we'll spend time together on a weekend. And so what happens is he's planned so much that not only his spouse, but also me and my spouse, none of us get a say.
Oh, gosh.
And so to your point, sometimes what's funny is he might be thinking, this is a great weekend. Everything's going perfect to plan. And we're all like, you're killing us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's great. And we like that. But the conversation part is tricky.
Yeah.
All right. We've been having each of the greenhouse coaches on the podcast, one episode at a time, for them to share about their area of expertise and for you all to meet them, since a lot of people haven't met them yet. So today is Katarina Polonska, and she is one of the newest greenhouse coaches. She lives in Ibiza, Spain, off the coast of Spain, an amazing island that we hope to have retreats at soon. She has lived in, I think, around 10 different countries, and she has studied at places like Oxford and Cambridge and just has a wealth of knowledge and experience to bring to the table. But she's also a really great coach because she herself has been through a lot of experiences. She's an ICF certified coach, but she's also an entrepreneur of her own. So she coaches on topics all across the board with people leadership, with personal growth, sales, DEI, areas that she has consulted and coaches in. But today we're talking about relationships, because this is actually her key focus area in coaching. The thing I really love about it is it comes out of a lot of her personal experience, and she shares the story today. But her journey was one of being kind of a high achiever type person, and then eventually realizing that she was bringing that same achiever mindset and behaviors into her relationships. And that was actually, in a sense, ruining things. And so when I first heard her story, I really resonated with it. I've been for years now kind of probably just starting to unpack some of that myself, of how that achiever mindset in our work can seep into our relationships, and actually what needs to shift to make those relationships better. And so we're talking today about some of Katarina's own story, but also how do you deal with needs and conflict within relationships to not just kind of solve the problem, but actually make it a place where the relationship thrives. So let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Katarina.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you just give a brief intro of yourself for those who are new to you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a greenhouse coach and also a relationship coach. So I have my own relationship coaching practice. And yeah, I live in Ibiza, which I moved here about 2 weeks ago. Pretty exciting. And I'll touch upon that, I guess, later in the podcast, why I'm back here, part of the career journey. But yeah, I do relationship coaching. I typically work with people who I call hardworking high achievers. So people who are very driven, very ambitious, very smart, and very good at life. But there are certain blockers, certain things that they can't seem to figure out. And very often it's the relationships. And this is certainly me throughout most of my life and most of my peers. So I'm very passionate about helping us figure this bit of our lives out.
Yeah. That's what made me most excited about this conversation, because the ones we have had around this topic, it's even been eye-opening to me, the way us achievers take that into relationships and think that we're winning and we're actually not.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll get into all that. But first, I always ask everyone, what was your very first job? Because it's kind of fascinating. Well, so what was your very first job?
Yeah. So I was actually debating between two jobs. One of them, the truth is, was my very first one, being that waitress at a Tesco cafe in the UK. And getting fired for not following their unsanitary food protocols. I refused to give a vegetarian like a meat dripping bit of meat. That was a potato. I just refused to do it, and I got fired. But actually, that was a very short-lived job. I think I lasted about 3 weeks. I really didn't last very long there. I was very ashamed. But then my second job, which came very shortly after, was pretty cool. I remember I grew up in the town that Roald Dahl, the writer, grew up in. And so one day I was walking home from school and I had the Roald Dahl Museum. And I was thinking at this time, I think I was 16, I was like, I need to get a job. I had nothing on my CV. I didn't even have a CV. And I remember popping into the Roald Dahl Museum and just saying like, hi, I need a job. And they were like, okay. Yeah, they were like, okay.
That's great.
Twice in my life that's worked. And and then I didn't even have to interview. They just said, okay, well, the rate was like £10 an hour or something. Come in on Saturday. And so I started, didn't even know what the role would be. It was being a kind of a jack of all trades. So I was doing the shop floor, selling at the Roald Dahl shop. But then I was also a storyteller. And that was probably one of the most fun jobs I've actually had. What I had to do. Yeah, they had because like children come to the Roald Dahl Museum, and I'd have to walk around like cleaning the museum and like spraying chocolate spray into the chocolate factory and all of this stuff. And then there was like a big trunk of all of Roald Dahl's like the Revolting Rhymes, that book that he wrote. There was a trunk of all of the different little outfits. And so my job, which I actually grew to not resent, but after a while I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore, was at breaks throughout the day to dress up in the different outfits and then reenact the Revolting Rhymes, the short stories, to the little kids. But the little kids who were coming in were like pretty high net worth kids, because the neighborhood is a really affluent neighborhood. And they were not impressed with my acting skills. I remember having to dress up as like the big bad wolf, and then having to quickly change to the Red Riding Hood, and they're swearing in the Revolting Rhymes. So I ended up like reading out one of the rhymes really quickly and then accidentally swearing in front of the kids. And anyway, it was fun, very fun, full of drama. Very random.
This is a high talent bar for a
job. Yeah.
Childhood job. Wow. Yeah. I was just like mowing lawns and sweeping floors.
It was like acting out everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Well, give maybe a Cliff's Note version of what has happened from then till now. I mean, what does your career path look like? Oh
boy, where to begin? I'll go linear, because I actually think I've got one of the weirdest careers out there, and who knows, it's probably going to get even weirder.
Well, that's good. I think that's what's so helpful for people to hear, because it's actually more the norm than the exception.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, before I even went to university, I did my first life coaching certification. My dad is a coach, and he paid for me to do it. And so actually, even before I went to uni, I was like full, entrepreneur mode. I'm going to create a coaching business. I'm going to be a coach. I had my own like domain and everything, my little business cards. And I kept saying, I'm not going to uni. I'm just going to go and be an entrepreneur, even though I was very academic. And I decided to go to uni in the end. And I carried on doing my little coaching business there, teaching students how to be high achievers. That's my thing.
Now you're undoing your early work.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah, I was teaching them like how to be more high achieving. Anyhow, but yeah, people loved it. I remember at one point I made like a healthy amount of money for a student, right? In like 1 hour of coaching, and I loved it. I really loved it. But then I ended up focusing on my studies. And so then when I left uni, I originally wanted to be a journalist because I did a literature and humanities degree, and the recession had happened in 2008. So I remember looking at jobs and thinking, I can't live in London with this salary. Like, there is no way I can live in London with this. So then I read the book, What Color Is Your Parachute? I love that book. And
I just took it out of a box yesterday.
I love that book so much, yeah. And I did the kind of flower petal exercise thing. And I landed on this realization that I need to be in the wine industry, because I realized I like wine, I like people, I like socializing. The industry back then was pretty much male dominated. And I realized, well, if I come in with this, good university degree and I stand out a little bit, I could probably go quite far. So second time in my life, I was walking down through the street of London, through Borough High Street, and I saw a beautiful wine shop, and I popped in and said, I need a job. And they told me they can't give me a job, but they can give me an internship. And so I got an internship there where it was a really brilliant deal. For 3 months straight after uni, I worked there for free, but they paid for all of my wine training. So all of my WSETs and all of that. And I was in this beautiful shop where I got to taste wine every day and really learn about it and work with customers. So loved it. Really great internship. I think I've done so many internships in my life, and I think they're really great ways to get your foot in the door.
Did you offer to do skits when people brought children into the wine shop?
Definitely not. Though I can imagine that would have been to be honest, I think I was a skit half the time, getting up in my hair with all the wine. But
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I loved it. I did like wine tastings and stuff. And then I was like, okay, I need a proper job now, because I was commuting quite far to the head office up in the middle of England, and the commute was like, I couldn't do it. So I needed a job in London eventually. And I remember I heard about this one company that seemed really cool, like startup-y vibe. And basically I'd never really done this. I emailed all 10 people that I could find on their website, like 5-page cover letter and my CV, declaring why I want to work there, how I want to build a business, blah, blah, blah. And now I know in retrospect that actually it was a tiny office of 10 people. And everyone got my email.
They all got it at the same time.
And they were like, who is Katarina Polonska?
But see, this was the early glimmers of your genius, because I actually listened to you may have heard, Gary Vee did a big thing on this idea. It was the entire strategy was exactly that,
right,
to kind of message people who are in competing roles as peers, the same thing, so they feel like they need to be the first one to have the idea.
Yeah, because everyone was like, did you just get an email from Catherine? Did you get an email from Catherine? They're like, who is she? And
suddenly you're a big deal in their eyes.
They were like, who is this
That
person?
was genius.
So I got invited to the office that evening, like literally evening, it was like an 8 p.m. interview, which was quite scary. And I went in and it was like a blind wine tasting, very intense interview. I think they were kind of like feeling me out. And anyhow, long story short, I ended up doing like 4 interviews there, got the job. And then the day before I was meant to start, they folded that job because they'd actually realized they couldn't afford me at that point, or they couldn't afford the role. I was devastated because it was like my first job out of uni. I really needed the money. I really liked this company. I felt like I'd been hustling there for 6 weeks trying to get the role. And then, and then I remember, again, like, I don't know why I don't do this anymore. I should do more of the stuff. Then I remember my friend called me and she was like, there's a party at Cuckoo Club tonight in London. You should come. It's going to be good networking. Yeah. And because this champagne house, they were a champagne company, they were distributing to all of the high-end nightclubs in London. A little part of me was like, you know what? I don't feel like going. I actually feel really depressed because I didn't get the job and I really want to work there. But I'm going to go and see who I can meet at this club who might know another job. You know, maybe they know them. So I went. I had my CV tucked into my little handbag. And I went and I met the bar manager and I basically got talking to him and I handed him my CV. And he must have thought I was a complete lunatic. But anyhow, the next day, he actually gave that CV to one of the people at the company that I wanted to work at. And they were like, for crying out loud, her CV's arrived again. She won't let go. And that's when I remember the founder called me and he was like, okay, fine. Fine. We're going to hire
Yes.
you. We're going to hire you. And so I had my first
But it's
job.
kind of amazing. That's kind of amazing though, because that is, I mean, we're often teaching people about having curious conversations, getting in front of people. You don't just put your CV on a stack or, your resume online. And I think that there's something really helpful about the obliviousness of just, you just kind of abandon all the rules and norms, but there's actually something good in there
For sure.
that works when people aren't a natural at that.
Yeah. No, it's completely, it was like an earnest, I don't know, I have no shame. Like, I'm just gonna mass outreach. Obviously, they put me into sales, which I was like, what? No, I'm like an academic. But then
they're like, no, you've clearly already proven.
Yeah. And then so my first ever gig at sales in that company, they gave me a big crate of champagne and it was winter, freezing cold. And they were like, go sell it. I was like, go sell it where? They were like, just sell it to someone in London. So I was knocking on like gallery doors, really grueling, and they paid me nothing. But eventually my salary increased. But that basically inspired me to then, I realized I really like the industry. I really like the kind of entrepreneurial spirit. They were a very entrepreneurial company. And that inspired me to then meet my future co-founder, who I actually built a company with in Spain. So my second job was, again, I was very ballsy, had nothing to lose, to be honest, right? I was like, at the time I was 23 and I packed up my bags, moved to Spain. Here, actually, I can see my old apartment from the window, which is funny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like just across the bay. And I started building a champagne company. I was lucky my co-founder was more experienced. He had 10 years more experience than me. So he kind of led on everything. But yeah, we built a distribution, like a wine and champagne distribution company here. So did that. Didn't make that much money, I will say. But I think the year of experience was so powerful because again, I was young enough, I had nothing to lose, to be honest. My cost of living was so low and the life experience was so profound. What I did realize there was that I'm probably too young to be running a company for the rest of my life. Like I probably need to go and learn from a bigger corporation or something. And so I ended up leaving that company, going back to the UK, working for a bigger wine company. And it was up in the north of England. I was like, I don't want to be in the north of England. This doesn't work for me. I need to be nearer to London. Or actually, maybe I go abroad again. And at that point, everyone was going to Dubai. I think everyone's going to Dubai now. Dubai is still kind of this place that everyone's, mythic place people go to.
Yeah.
But back then it was 2014. There was a big influx of people going over. And it was either that or Hong Kong. And I remember thinking, I mean, why not? Like, why not? So I originally I was on LinkedIn, was talking to everyone that looked interesting in the industry. I met a guy from Hong Kong. He had like a potential job for me. And so I was looking at Hong Kong. Then I met a guy from Dubai. He had a potential job. I remember I was like evaluating, which is wild now to think that my life could have been so different.
Yeah.
But again, it was just like, what have I got to lose? I'm 24. Like, I'm just going to go and see which country. I was like on Google, like comparing the two countries.
Yeah.
And in the end, Dubai won for me because it was a bit nearer. The cost of living was a bit lower. I realized I can like have a nicer apartment. And so then I accepted this job again in the drinks industry, moved to Dubai. I remember landing and being like, oh, I'm in the Middle East now. I hadn't really done my due diligence properly. But it was cool. And I ended up being in Dubai for like nearly 3 years. I didn't enjoy it that much, to be honest. Like it wore away at me a little bit. But as it wore away at me and I stopped loving the drinks industry because it was very different there. Like I couldn't advertise the way that I was used to advertising because it was back then, it was illegal to advertise alcohol. And so my enjoyment for the industry left, but my passion for human rights went up because actually living there was so much construction and I'm still a bit scared to speak too badly, but I just saw things that made me really passionate about, justice and human rights. And I was really fascinated as well about gender inequality and how, I'm an Eastern European woman, but have a British accent. So people don't really know. And actually, because of my nose, people thought I was like Iranian. So I kind of got away with a lot of things. But once people did know that I'm from an Eastern European background, my kind of ranking in the gender hierarchy like plummeted. And I would see the same with men, like the different races would have different hierarchies. And it was all really fascinating and horrific to me. And I basically realized, it's like, I don't think I want to do the champagne stuff anymore. I think I want to go into international development or international aid. I want to have an impact in the world. I want to go into charity, but I don't want to start my career from scratch. I've like been hustling so hard to get to a salary where I'm actually able to live. I don't want to have to go back to minimum wage. And so I knew that the only other way to get into another industry, not the only other way, but one of the main ways to get into another industry would be to do a master's degree or do some kind of study qualification. I couldn't afford it. So I basically made a plan to stay in Dubai for an extra year, save up and apply to do a master's degree. And all of that, I mean, it sounds like it was very logical. Truth be told, it was like 6 months of me being really, really stuck, like not knowing what I'm doing with my life, crying a lot, being really depressed and thinking like, I want to get out of this industry. I don't know what country I'm going to go to. I don't know how I'm I don't know what to do. It was really hard to break into the nonprofit sector because it was quite everyone was very educated there. And anyhow, so for me, it was a master's degree. And then, yes, I applied to different unis, got into Oxford, of all places, which again, I didn't think I'd even get into there, and actually got a scholarship to go there, which was, when that happened, I thought it was like an April Fool's joke. You honestly didn't believe it happened. So went and studied gender studies there. One of the best things I've ever done, and informed the relationship coaching that I do now. And then after Oxford, I went into the charity sector full time. I originally started out in like international development consulting. So kind of private sector consulting, but in the aid space. I lasted 3 months. Like I went in and I was like, I smell corruption here. I smell things that I don't know if I, can get on board with. And the organization I was with, I'm not going to name them. But they were caught out quite badly by the media for doing very unethical things. So I lasted 3 months. Again, it was a case of, holy cow, what do I do now? Like I've relocated my life. I now live in London. I've got this apartment. I've got like a 12-month rent commitment, and I hate my job and I need to quit and I don't have money coming in. So actually I go on Facebook. I literally wrote on Facebook, I need a job. I will do anything. I just need cash flow. And I want to work in the charity sector. And that actually led me to one of my dream jobs, funnily enough, because a guy replied, and he's still a friend, and he was like, oh, this organization called Founders Pledge, they're hiring. Talk to the founder. So I went and had a coffee with the founder, and he told me that they had a listing that they were going to put up to hire someone to be like a growth kind of sales assistant or executive. And he, loosely interviewed me, and he was like, come in and do a proper interview. So we did a proper interview. And by the end of the day, I had the job. And honestly, that was one of my happiest jobs ever. Like, it's so funny how I came with such a low expectation of like, I just need £500 a month cash flow to pay my bills. And it ended up translating into one of my favorite jobs. So
what did you love so much about it?
The team were lovely. It's very different now. My understanding is it was like a much bigger setup. Back then it was like 8 to 10 people. I think I was like the 9th person or something like that. And we felt like a family, honestly. It was like that kind of like startup-y hustle without the horrible hustle. It was like, okay, we work, from a little office and we'll have lunch together and everyone's doing a bit of everything, but we all know each other. We're all buddies really. And we're all, driven by the cause and we're all passionate about our work. And it was just a really nice family dynamic that I loved, like a proper community. And it felt really meaningful. And that's when I realized I'm really good at sales actually, because I was ultimately like selling a pledge, a commitment to do philanthropy. And I just got into the swing of it. And I was like, oh, wow, like I can have serious impact in the world if I'm doing this stuff and building relationships with different clients. And that actually led me to building a relationship with a really cool entrepreneur out of, he was living in Turkey at the time. And he'd created an AI-driven system to identify when bombs were going to be hitting civilians in Syria. This was during kind of the Syrian war. So he was doing really impactful work. And when I was on holiday that year, when I was working at that philanthropic tech startup, I went to Vancouver to visit a friend from Dubai. I just went there on holiday to see him. And I ended up falling in love with Vancouver. I thought it was the most beautiful city I'd ever been to in Canada. And that's when I was like, I think I want to move here. So I remember I was like, how do I do this international move from England to Canada, I'm like, I'm not in a rush. I want to take my time, but I think I do want to go there. Also, at the time I was like 27. I was like, I don't think I'm going to meet a life partner in London. It's time for me to kind of go to maybe a smaller city, slow down. I want more nature. I want like a different lifestyle. And so I got on LinkedIn and basically found everyone in my alumni group in Vancouver, and like systematically messaged every single person and was just like, hi, what do you do? How do you like living there? And
I sense a theme in your life.
And made actually some really powerful connections. And then I made one connection, and I'm inviting her to my second wedding. We met on LinkedIn, a fellow alumna, and we got talking. I was very candid. I was like, I've heard Vancouver's a bit boring. How is it for you there? Like, you're from New York. And we got on the phone, and then she was like, oh, let's meet for a drink when I'm in London. I didn't really even understand what she did. And then she came to London, and we ended up having a drink, and then she was talking, and then she was like, I'm actually hiring. I'm hiring for like a head of growth to help me build this impact investment vehicle. And I didn't know what impact investing was. And then after bonding and getting to know her, I then met another co-founder. And then again, before I knew it, I had a job and I moved to Vancouver. So that was like big move. It's like, I'm going to keep going, but this is like very meandering career story.
It's fascinating. You're hitting, what countries have we not hit yet?
Yeah, no, good point. I spent a bit of time in Brazil, but I've left that one out. But that was when I was in Spain. But yeah, so then I was in Vancouver and I did this philanthropic initiative for a year. And it was incredible, hardcore startup, working out of my little studio flat. And I was like creating like everything, the CRM. I was just creating everything from scratch, like the website, and trying to build, like really build from scratch, as we had a 10 million euro target in 1 year, which is an insane target to try and fundraise for. And so at the end of that year, we all burnt out. Basically, everyone in that program had, like the three of us had burnt out, and the program kept going. We couldn't hand it over to the folks on the ground, but everyone pretty much has burnt out. I decided at that point, I was like, I can do more philanthropy. I think it's just too emotionally taxing. And I'm so married to the work. I'm not going to marry anyone else. Like, I'm just obsessed with the philanthropic initiative. So I decided I'm going to take a sabbatical. This is one of the dumbest things I think I've ever done. I was like, I'm taking a sabbatical. I'm going to go work for the Canadian government. So again, it was like on LinkedIn, find more alums, find people who work in government. Because I heard that they were doing pretty cool things. And I met this really lovely woman who connected me to this other guy. And then again, I had an interview and didn't really understand what they were doing. But I eventually learned it was like an R&D VC, and they needed someone to be head of growth. And so I was like, okay, like, let's explore this. I'll get to know the ecosystem, and I'm having impact here in Vancouver. It was not a sabbatical. It was actually one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. Like, it was like easily 12, 14-hour days and extremely grueling work and a lot of bureaucracy. And yeah, I didn't last long. I lasted a year, which I'm impressed I even lasted a year. And the next job's an interesting one because, again, it was LinkedIn. I'd been looking around in Vancouver. This is actually from back when I first started looking at people in Vancouver. Okay. A guy that I'd connected with who worked for a company called Mind Gym. And I was like, I don't know what this is. Are they like Headspace? And we'd had a few conversations, and then we'd fallen silent for a year. And I'd actually interviewed with them in 2019, and they told me they're not hiring in Canada. And so I was like, okay. In 2020, he called me back a whole year later, and he was like, are you still interested in working here? And I remember like that call came inbound, and I was doing a 12-hour work day for that government job. And I actually started like screaming down the phone. I was so happy to hear from him. I was like, yes, I want to leave. I don't like my job. And so I ended up moving to this behavioral science consultancy. And I was the only hire out of Canada because the guy who hired me, he left. And that was like my first job that I lasted 2.5 years in. At this point, I was like 29, right? So 29, and I finally found a job that I actually genuinely, place I liked, job I liked, role I liked, people I liked. Like, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave Vancouver. I didn't want to go to a different place. And so, yeah, I really found my feet there, and I got promoted to a regional vice president and became really like good at sales. That was kind of the thing that I was doing there, but it was also behavioral science and consulting, and got to know the Vancouver ecosystem and Canada, and really, really amazing work. And I finally got to use my gender studies degree doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I honestly thought this is a job I can probably stay in for like 6 to 10 years. I can probably stay.
Yeah.
I can, I was engaged in Vancouver to my ex, and I thought my life is just going to be working here. Like, that's it. I'm done. I'm kind of retiring. And it felt great because I've been moving around so much in my 20s. I just want to be stable. And then 2 things happened. One, I pulled off the engagement, which didn't really affect my career, but it did make me think, do I want to stay in Vancouver now? Like, I've been here 5 years. I don't have a support network here. I am very far from home. And then the second thing that happened was the Ukraine war happened, and my dad's in Ukraine. So when that kicked off, I was like, okay, I think I need to get back to Europe. I tried really hard to relocate back to Europe with that company, to their London office. Like, I was negotiating for about 6 months. I really wanted to make that move, but ultimately it would have meant I had to get a demotion. So I would have lost my regional vice president title. I would have taken a big pay cut. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense at this point in my career. And Better Up, a big competitor of theirs, a big coaching company, they'd interviewed me like 3 different times. They kept coming after me. And so I remember like picking up the phone and talking to them again and being like, okay, all right, let's do this. Let's do this. And so
Yeah.
I think it was like 12 interviews later. That was the most intense interview process of my life. To the point that by the end of it, I was like, I have to get this bloody job. Like, I have to get this job. But yeah, I got the job and moved to London and started up my new life for like the 100th time in London with Better Up. And this time round, it was interesting. This time around, the international move felt awful. Like, every international move I'd done before was filled with excitement and energy and like, wow, where am I now? In Vancouver and Dubai and Spain. This time in London, it was like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? And the first 2 months, I was so depressed. I honestly was like, I don't believe in regrets, and I don't think I make mistakes, but I think I made a big mistake, and I think I regret this move. I didn't enjoy the work at all. I found the work was not what I thought it would be, and it was just, it gave me a really clear sense of like, okay, I don't think I want to work in this kind of a tech, like big tech startup. This company is too big for me. There's a lot of things that I really kind of had felt. And then I just didn't like London. And like, I got quite depressed, to be honest, and was really like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life now. I feel quite lost. I genuinely felt really lost. And so I was doing a lot of therapy. I was doing a lot of coaching. I was very lucky at Better Up to get so much coaching, like incredible coaching. And so, yeah, I was getting coaching and therapy. And then I decided I'm going to take a career break and just give myself time off and, train to be a coach myself because I really enjoy it. And probably work with women, because I'm a woman, on the side, and maybe help them leave toxic relationships, was my initial thought. And yeah, and then a week later, I met my now husband. And before I knew it, we were both on sabbatical together. We were both essentially traveling the world, because he was from Canada and we met in London, trying to figure out where can we legally live that we both want to live in. Because he didn't want to go back to Canada. He didn't want to live in England. And so we were in Colombia for a while, we were in Albania, we were in Slovakia, we were traveling all over. And before I knew it, I found myself building a coaching business. Partly because I was like, I'm not used to not working, right? It was very odd to me to not be working. And partly, truth be told, fear. I was like, I don't like not earning money. It freaks me out. I've never not earned money. And even though I had savings, it felt like, I feel like it's foolish, which this is wrong. I would never advise this to anyone. I think I almost wish I'd had the nervous system strength to take a full year off. I didn't. I didn't. I think partly maybe because of calling off the engagement and Ukraine war and all of the different like micro traumas that had happened. I think my nervous system couldn't handle the experience of not earning money and traveling. Like, it just, there was something very odd about it. And so I started building this business. And now I'm here 11 months later, and I'm still building it, obviously, fully in the relationship coaching space, realizing I really do love this, still figuring it out, because I miss, elements of like working with people like you and doing kind of more high level stuff. But I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
I actually don't know. Like, it's fully unknown.
Well, given the path to now, it's already pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
do you have a take on, I'm curious, since you have been in big company environment, small startup, your own business, lots of different countries and contexts. What's your take on, is it better to have experience in a big company before starting your own, or do you actually get too soft and lose the edge of being able to grind, being able to break all the rules, and some of the things that entrepreneurs benefit from if they haven't been in a big context?
That's a really good question. And I think one I've grappled with most of my career, actually, because I'll never forget calling the Oxford University Career Service when I was like 28. Being like, well, what do you think I should do? And almost being like shamed by the career service of, well, you screwed up. When you left uni, you should have gone to work for, what's the company? It was like Unilever, or a big company where you can learn marketing. Learn marketing. If you can learn marketing in a big, big, big company, you're gold. You're made for life because you have a really fundamental skill. You understand how corporations work and you're set. And I remember thinking like, but I didn't do that. And I think I would have hated that, to be honest, for me personally. Like, I'm happy I spent my 20s traveling and seeing the world. But I don't know. Sometimes I do wonder, would I be much wealthier and more established if I'd gone into a big corporation and stayed there for a decade? I think I would have potentially made more money and been more quote unquote successful. Would I be happier though? I don't know. And would I have had such a rich life? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I grapple with it too. And when I get that question from others, it's hard to answer because I feel like I gained a lot of organizational skills and understanding how corporations work from being in that context that have helped me in business. But I also feel like, gosh, there's so much edge lost, and there's so much, if you're in that context too long, then you actually lose sight of reality.
Absolutely.
Like the marketing comment is funny to me because I currently, in today's world, I actually think what you learn about marketing in a big corporation applies 0% to small business.
Yeah.
And of course, the fundamental principles and concepts translate, but the way a big company and a startup actually do brand and marketing is completely different.
100%. No,
I don't know. It's a tricky topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but we're here to talk about relationships. So let's get into that. And I would love to just hear some of your backstory. I mean, you've already shared a bit of the timeline, but your experience that led to this kind of relationship coaching, because I'm personally very into this topic lately as well. As you know, I've been doing a lot of relationship coaching with Ashley, and it's so difficult, and yet it's so fun and hopeful at the same time, because you can make a lot more progress than you realize, or you uncover things you didn't even realize were there. And I just think it's one of the most important things. So anyway, I would love to hear whatever you want to share about that. But I know that people appreciate hearing some of the personal experience, because I think there's still a lot of taboo around this.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I was just talking to a woman about it earlier. She's founding a dating app and she's still single in her 40s, and she was kind of talking about her struggle. And I think it's not talked about enough. And it has very real implications on our lives. Like, who we marry or who we spend our life with has huge ramifications on our careers, like really huge. And I mean, I speak from experience. So I spent my 20s, I was in a couple of long-term relationships. I think a lot of us are. And then I was single for about five years after my dad left. So I think that was probably a bit of a trauma response there. And I was living in Dubai and everything. And then, around 28, when I was in Vancouver, I had this mindset of, I'm 28. I should probably be married or kind of edging towards that now. I'm a bit late to the party, which is funny because my thinking shifts around that. But
sure.
I remember being like, okay, I need to make this actually a thing. And so it's not like I was being ultra strategic about it, but I was certainly in a headspace of, I want to make something work now. And I met this guy on Bumble, and we had a few dates, and we went on to have a really picture perfect, lovely, kind of very traditional cliche relationship. And I mean that in the best of senses. Like, it looked lovely. Like, our Instagram was wonderful and we did all of the wonderful things. And I remember thinking in my head, like, I finally have what I've always wanted. I finally have the thing that feels like I'm now successful on some subconscious level. Like, I always wanted someone to post about me on their Instagram. I always wanted to have like a beautiful engagement shot on my, my Instagram. I always wanted to have someone to go like wine tasting with and to travel and to meet the parents and to have in-laws. And it really was lovely. And then I was planning a wedding and that was so fun and exciting. And like, it was all COVID at this point. So I didn't get the full experience. Like, I couldn't go try on dresses with my family. But I realize now that I was caught up in the narrative of what a really lovely relationship should look like. And I was dismissing the very real fact that internally I think I knew like really early on. I think he knew as well that we weren't right for each other. And I think he was kind of forcing it, probably out of like pressure from family and society and parents and whatever. I think I was forcing it. I don't think either of us even realized we were forcing it. I think it was just this feeling of, this is it. Like, right? Like, I didn't know that there could be more. And there were times when I couldn't sleep at night that I would be thinking like, is this it? Like, my career was great. I was earning great money. I had a beautiful apartment. We'd bought an apartment together. Our relationship was like, ostensibly fine. Like, yeah, we had our own issues and stuff, but I was remembering like, I don't know if is this it? Like, this is quite scary.
And it's a hard thing in the moment. Yeah, it's one thing to reflect back on it, but in the moment, and I had some similar experiences where, what do you have to compare to? I mean, where's the measurement? Exactly. So even if you feel something like that, how do you, it's hard to know.
Exactly.
Is that substantial? Do I do something with that?
Exactly.
And then again, the taboo part of like, am I the only one feeling this? I mean, the more and more I get into relationship coaching for myself, but also work with people in that space, is wow, everyone tends to think they're alone in it, in the struggles, and yet there's no more common denominator than challenges in your core relationship. I mean, it's the hardest relationship in your life.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah, no, exactly. And I had this thought that I think, I don't know if a lot of high achievers think this. I know a lot of people I work with think this, but I had this sort of like, it must be something wrong with me. And my parents are divorced, so maybe I have a commitment phobia. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just really anxiously attached. I don't know. And so I went down this rabbit hole of, again, because I worked in behavioral science, of basically using a lot of my income to read about stuff, download programs, do group trainings, do one-on-one coaching. Like, goodness, I did everything from like attachment stuff to looking at masculinity, femininity stuff, to looking like a lot of polarity work, to doing like psychedelics and just really everything that I could get my hands on, because I was so determined to understand. And yeah, I remember I had a feminist therapist who gave me very cutthroat words that I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't think I like her. I don't think I want to see her again. I think when we have that reaction to any coach or therapist, we know that they're probably saying some truth, right? Because I was so triggered. I was like, I have to block and delete her. Like, I'm never going to talk to her again. Horrible woman. But she basically pointed out, without going into too much detail, a very fundamental value misalignment between me and my ex, like very clear value misalignment. And they really haunted me. And we were having like marital counseling as well. And there were things coming out there as well that were kind of pointing to really obvious, you folks aren't compatible. Like, this isn't really going to work. And if it's going to work, it's going to work over like 5 years of hard work, hard slog. And yeah, I didn't want to wait 5 years. And I think one of the best bits of advice I had from the marriage counselor was like, you have to give it a deadline. There has to be a deadline in your mind and a boundary around what you need to see within X amount of time to know that you're going ahead with this. And I wasn't married yet. And for me, it was 6 months. And I held that boundary very tight. And, you know, at the end of the 6 months, I didn't see the improvement. And then there was other stuff that was revealed that made it very clear that we weren't right for each other.
Sure.
But yeah, I ended up calling it off. And it was interesting because I actually have a friend who just went through the same thing, where on the one hand, there's kind of a very clear decisiveness of like, I can't go through with this. I can't stay with this person. Obviously, you still love them. That doesn't mean you stay with them. Love isn't enough. And there's a clear kind of like pull to like, I have to make this move. But then there's this also fear of, well, what's going to happen next? And then when the move is done, in my case, like, you know, he moved out and separated finances and everything, then like the crippling reality of it all hit me. And my friend just, you know, she left her husband now, and she's going through the grief. And it was hands down the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I had anorexia as a teenager, and I overcame that, you know, like my parents divorced, and that was really bad. But like, this was the hardest thing. And it's not, we were only together for like 2.5 years, like 3 years. Like, I think it was the hardest thing because my whole identity and sense of self imploded, because I was in my early 30s at this point, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. How did I get this far? I thought I was doing everything right. I honestly thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was being proactive. I was fixing the problem. I was getting the marital counseling. I was doing the therapy, doing the plant medicine. I was doing bloody everything I could. How is it that I've messed up and this has imploded so badly? And it was, I don't want to use like ego death as a term, but I certainly hit like such a rock bottom low. And I just, it was hands down the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. What did you realize coming out of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think what I realized is I had never truly, like, I had never really, this might sound really woo-woo, but I'd never really let myself, quote unquote, be seen. And what I mean by that is I realized I'd not been authentic throughout that relationship. And I'd not been authentic throughout a lot of my career, actually. When I really lost my sense of self, it was like, but of course, in retrospect, we weren't right for each other. That was pretty clear. Like, you know, later it came to me, and of course this isn't my dream job. Like, it pays the bills and, you know, have a nice shiny title, but I'm not spiritually fulfilled with this work. I wasn't spiritually fulfilled in my relationship. I just realized that I'd been kind of almost like, not people pleasing, but like wearing this kind of perfectionisty or like this kind of mask of, everything's fine. I've got it figured out. Everything's okay. This is nice.
Well, when we first talked about this, I had that same word, the mask, that because I'm still uncovering and realizing the extent of this, but that there's probably multiple masks I wear. But in my relationship for a long time, it's I'm not sure how to name it still, but it's something like, well, I don't need anything. I'm good. Like, that's kind of the mask, is saying to others, and definitely to my wife, like, I'm good. I don't need anything, because I'm just someone who like solves problems and gets things done. And I like to carry others, you know, fix things for other people and make sure they're comfortable. Well, then the problem is you add up a bunch of years of that. And what I've been realizing is, wow, A, she doesn't necessarily know the real me sometimes because that mask is up. But B, it's hard for then her to help meet any of those needs if she doesn't even know they're there. And I just appreciate how your story and how you frame the achiever, bringing their achiever mindset into relationships is almost the source of a lot of these problems, because we also talked recently, had a realization that if we're having to figure something out together, we go off separately and try to solve the problem independently and then bring our solutions back to each other. And it never works. And a coach called this out in a way that, similar to your story, was hard to hear in the moment, and I wanted to delete and reject.
Yeah.
And then it's been sinking in, and we've been realizing, wow, that is our approach, because that's what we've learned in our work, and that's what we've been praised for, and that's kind of the mindset we brought in. And that doesn't work. We have to solve problems together, not separately. But we didn't know how to do that because those masks are up, and it sounds so easy. Well, just talk through it together. And we didn't know how. We actually, we still are really learning, how do we talk through something, work through something together? And I think it just requires a lot of vulnerability that just, it's difficult.
100%.
It's hard to go there.
It's so hard to go. And like, yeah, you're spot on. And there's two things I want to say to that. And thank you for sharing that. One is, I think when we have that mask, we don't know we have that mask, because frankly, it's all I knew. I can pinpoint to like a handful of times in my life. One was on like the Hoffman Process retreat, where I hit another kind of like mini rock bottom in a good way. But there's a handful of times when I really felt like free, and like, my shadow was free to be expressed, and the kind of the ugly, quote unquote, side of me. Outside of that, like, yeah, I wouldn't do that, of course, because I was always tempering myself. I was always being mindful of, don't be too much, or don't be that angry, jealous Slavic woman, or whatever it was, whatever narrative I'd been fighting. We don't know that we've got that mask. And that's where I think most of us have a mask. We just don't know it. And yeah, with that high achiever, of course, we're trying to do everything right? Like, but no one ever teaches us how to do things properly. I think to your point about how hard things can be in relationship, when it's in the right relationship and you're navigating that conflict, or navigating tension. I can't remember who it was, but it's this kind of idea, and my teacher, Lisa Page, she talked about this too, but it's this idea that our biggest work, I think it's John Wineland who talked about this, but like our biggest work in relationship is to train our nervous systems when we're with another to stay in integrity and to stay grounded and to not go into collapse. And what he means by that, or what the teachers mean by that, is so often we can't hold conflict, the energy of conflict. We can't hold the energy of disagreement. We can't hold the energy of we've upset our partner, or something that they've done has upset us. And so we go into collapse. And when we go into collapse, that's when the trauma responses start coming out, whether it's getting angry, whether it's crying, whether it's shutting down, walking away, whatever it might be. And that, I think, is one of the hardest muscles that we have to build. And something, even last night, I was tired. I was simply tired. My partner said something to me. It wasn't remotely upsetting if I'd been full of energy, but I was tired. I had low bandwidth. It was past 11 p.m. And he said something that I got a little bit triggered by, and I could feel the collapse, because I was like, I feel that collapse now. I feel myself just like folding in on myself. And I was like, I want to pull myself back up and stay here.
Well, and that's part of what I love about this type of coaching, counseling, therapy, is the first step of getting aware of those things is actually a huge step, because now in that moment, I can notice the feeling and be objectively looking at it and maybe start to manage it better, versus it just happens and I don't even know what's going on. I'm actually now a victim to it in the moment.
Exactly.
So I've been on a similar journey. We've been, I'm actually curious your thoughts and advice on this, because when there is a triggering moment or emotions are heightened, we've tried some different ways to kind of pause and come back to it when we're in a more grounded state. And I have found that for me, it helps that in the heat of the moment, I'm definitely not going to be my best self or be helpful to her in the way that I talk. But later, if I can come back to it, and for me, it usually means a little bit of pre-thinking, like, what do I want to say? Maybe even how I want to say it. Then we can have a productive conversation where we're I don't know if we want to talk about like mirroring or, some of these techniques to listen to each other and try to understand each other. It feels for me impossible in the moment of heightened emotions, but it does feel more possible. Still very, very hard, but much more possible if we can come back to it when we're cooled down later.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, but you're spot on. And I think that kind of that timeout, basically, which is what you're saying, right? That the timeout is one of the greatest gifts we can give each other when we're getting to that conflict state. It either has to be a timeout or like a soothing down of the nervous system. So again, it's kind of this idea that like we're responsible for our side of the street, right? But our side of the street, our commitment to our partner is to try to meet their needs and to try to regulate their nervous system. Like that is fundamentally one of at least I believe, if you're in a monogamous relationship. I know some people might believe that you do you and you do you and you're both independent. I think if you're in a committed relationship, there is a responsibility to trying your best to try and soothe and like gift your partner with calm, with peace, with letting them be heard, right? It's the loveliest thing we can do. And so when we feel ourselves getting activated, it's really a case of, do I have the strength right now to keep bringing my own nervous system down to calm? And can I actually lean into my partner and either like take their hand or like rub their shoulder, like breathe slower and try to regulate them down? Because that gives them the sense of being heard and seen and empathized with, that touch. Can I have the strength to say, I hear you?
Yeah.
Right? It's so hard.
so hard. I'm forever fascinated with, my dream for Greenhouse is to have these types of retreats around this type of content. And it's forever fascinating to me how this sounds so basic. And yet in the moment, it's one of the hardest things to do.
We're so hijacked, right? But that's why
we're so hijacked.
But that's why it's like, I think the timeout's brilliant. Because I think until we've learned that or trained that muscle of being able to just breathe and self-soothe and calm ourselves down and then lean in to calm the other, then removing ourselves from that situation is one of the best things that we can do. Because really, it's just about how quickly can we begin to soothe? How quickly can we soothe ourselves and soothe the other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to play, the devil's advocate that I would be listening to this, because even just a few years ago, I would say, yeah, but then we're never going to come back around to it because it's a hard topic and we're busy people. So no, we're never going to come back to it. So in the heat of the moment, I want to resolve it now or work through the tension now. And our coach had us start relationship check-in meetings. So, I'm I'm a nerd on like calendar blocks and having systems around things. So we did this and it felt so cheesy at first. We had like a business meeting recurring on the calendar once a week for us to check in on us. And we failed so many attempts at this, the iterations. One day I probably need to share it and show like a diagram of all the versions we tried, because at first we were like, okay, we're here at this meeting. And then, triggers just start going off when we try to talk about anything, or we want to avoid it and we reschedule it, or all these things. So I don't want to give anyone the impression we just started this and it was amazing. We've been working at this for some years, but now most of them go pretty well, where we have pre-thought like what we need to talk about, how we're going to talk about it. And we work on this thing mirroring, which is another way that we can help calm each other's nervous system. It's so hard. We're not great at it, but we're learning to, if you share something and you say, well, this was really hard, or this is how I was feeling. My job is not to respond or say my side of it, but simply to repeat back what you said.
Yeah.
And not to interpret it either. I always think I need to put it in my own words, but to just say exactly what you said, because that is so calming to you to hear that I heard you. And it's funny how even when we know we're forcing it, even if I know you don't mean it, it still feels good. I feel heard and understood. And then I'm able to either expand on my thought or correct you if you were misunderstanding it. And what happens often for us is we realize, I say something, you repeat it back. And then when I hear it back, I go, actually, no, that's not what I meant to say. Let me retry it. And I find that it feels, something about it feels cheesy or difficult because it's awkward.
Yeah.
It's a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
And that's our struggle in doing it. It takes, I think, humility to say, okay, I'm going to do this thing that feels awkward. And I'm going to push through. And we had a conversation the other day that humility, we're finding lately that we're actually growing closer because of the humility that it forces. We have to kind of, the masks have to come down in that moment.
Yeah, I love that, because that's almost like in literary terms, like a postmodern way of connecting through the awkwardness of it, right? Because the awkwardness is also intimacy building. Because
it is.
How humbling that as human beings, we get hijacked by our old patterns, our old traumas, and it's not our fault. Unfortunately, no one raised our parents teaching them how to raise us. No one raised us teaching us how to be good in relationship. We don't know. At the end of the day, it's not our fault. Our responsibility is to learn new behaviors. We're going to keep repeating the same patterns until we actively step in and start building new behaviors, right? And that might feel awkward.
Yeah.
Riding a bike felt awkward at the beginning, right?
Yes, it will be awkward. And I appreciate your point, because if we're speaking to achievers, also giving ourselves grace, we're not going to get it all right.
I didn't get it all right.
And we will, And even though I'm trying to improve and then pass this new knowledge down to my kids, like, I'm not going to pass that on right either. And, but there's still so many wins that we can have in it.
Yeah.
So can you talk for a minute about needs as well? I know that, especially in your coaching and in the tools that people can access, we'll talk about conflict and moving conflict. How did you talk about it? You had a good little phrase there, moving conflict to connection.
I think, like conflict can be the right breeding ground for connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I felt that when you said that phrase, I was like, yes, I think some of our best connection has been when we proactively worked through conflict. But the needs are understanding our needs, communicating our needs, meeting each other's needs. It's such a huge part of it as well. I know that you're big on.
Yeah. I mean, they're all interconnected, right? Because I love talking about needs, because I remember when I discovered the behavioral science behind needs, it was like, everything makes sense. And simply put, our needs drive, I don't know what the stat is, like I'm going to say 90%. I don't know if that's right, but a lot of our behavior, subconscious behaviors. So who we are as individuals, based on our upbringing, based on our childhood patterns, our traumas, we will all have different needs. And those needs will be dictated potentially, by our parents, even before our parents, like by our cultural upbringing, again, whatever that might be. And these needs are really fundamental to who we are. And so I think it was honestly Tony Robbins who came up with like the first list of the core needs. And then you have secondary needs, and then you have tertiary needs, and the different needs kind of all stem off from each other. So for example, I was working with a client today looking at careers, and for him, he kept coming up with, everything he wanted to do had to be important. Like the word important kept coming, like doing important work with important people. And so clearly there was a need for significance, right? A need to feel significant and to have that kind of influence and that weight. So we all have needs. And parallel to that, when we are in relationship, our partner's needs will be dictating how they behave. And so if we can understand our partner's core needs, we can see through conflict much faster, because conflict is typically a symptom of our needs not getting met. It's really that simple, right? So, and again, we all have different needs. So if we can do the pre-work and understand quite clearly, what are my needs? What are my partner's needs? And then when conflict comes up, okay, I think this is why they're upset, or, they're telling me why they're upset. These needs aren't getting met. Is there a way that I can help meet those needs for them now? Right? We kind of like, not only through the act of conflict are we able to communicate different ways that we can get our needs met. And that's the connection piece. But we also can be empowered to think creatively. Well, if I know that their needs are X, Y, and Z, how can I take the initiative to lean in and repair by meeting those needs. And it might be something simple as like, you know, I have a big need for safety, for example. I have a really big need for safety, I think maybe even bigger than most. I was doing some therapy the other day and she was like, well, you know, you're a first generation migrant and you come from an Eastern European background and the communism was ending and there's a lot of like stuff there that your parents inherited and that's impacted you. And so you don't feel safe. I've been traveling for 11 months. So you don't feel safe when you're traveling over the whole finance stuff. So just if you have a really strong need for safety and that needs solving for in every respect. And so my partner knows that. And so for him, his big priority is how can I help Kat feel safe? And I think that's like the most lovely thing to receive.
Yeah.
It's so lovely, right?
That's so great. I had a sneaking suspicion recently as we've been working on this. We've been talking about needs for a few years and still trying to really, really uncover it. And I found this little quiz from Mike Foster because he has a book coming out called Your Primal Question, which is basically another way of framing your core needs.
Yeah.
And I had a suspicion lately. I even said it out loud to Ashley one day, I think 2 weeks ago. I said, I think for me, the deepest thing is wanting to be wanted.
Yeah.
Which in the same way as you, like that started a lot of chain reaction light bulbs for me.
Yeah.
And so I took this little quiz and that's what it spit out was the need to be wanted. And then she took it and we also agreed on hers. And so it was helpful to see that because I don't know about you, I find that the first step in all of this is actually understanding what our needs are. Because we could never communicate about it, let alone serve each other well until we actually knew what some of those things were.
Yeah.
But then I heard this quote that really resonated that in your core relationship with your partner, and it was speaking specifically to marriage, but it is not a place to stand up for your rights, but the job of both of you is to try and satisfy the other's needs.
Oh, I love that.
And it stood out so much because it almost felt abrasive because culturally speaking, I'm going to make a generalization, but I think it's such an independence-based society. And then achievers even more so because we're all about trying to like make our own way and make it work. And we bring that into our relationship. And we've been realizing lately that we're often trying to do our own thing. And it's not that we don't want to help the other person, but there's that almost that, not competition, but there's something so nice about, no, I'm going to make it my goal to meet your needs and you to make mine. And that just is such a huge boost to the relationship to even know that they're thinking that, let alone to do it.
For sure. For sure.
But it feels like we're not really primed that way.
Well,
the primer feels a little more independence.
And as you were saying that, no, you're spot on it. As you were saying that, it got me thinking like, is there maybe something around, is there like a primal drive that, if this person needs me to meet their needs and they're quote unquote needy, there's something like, as you were saying that, I almost felt like a revulsion come up of like, they can't look after themselves. Get them away from me.
Exactly. And of course, all of which there's real reasons why you would need to protect yourself in situations. Understanding that, we get that. But then that starts to drive our narrative. No. These are my rights. And, I hold up a wall and protect myself against you. And next thing you know, well, we're not actually helping each other at all. Yeah. We're almost at odds with each other. So I don't know, for where we were at, that really stood out to me.
Yeah. No, completely. I think there's such humility that has to be learned to be successful in a relationship. Humility, willingness to be wrong, willingness to let our ego down, our pride down, and this kind of like leaning in and leaning towards our partner, which is really hard.
Okay. Well, we could go on for a while, but how about so people can access coaching and the resources that we'll link to all of that. But maybe in a nutshell, for anyone that's maybe hasn't thought about some of this yet, or is starting to think about it, how would you summarize kind of the needs and the conflict and what they could do? Like, what's the first step they could take in all this?
Yeah. It's so cliche that to be able to connect with others, we have to first connect with ourselves, right? Like if we don't do that inner work, then there's no way that we can become someone who actually attracts that right connection to others. So it all begins with the self. And it just begins with doing some pretty simple, like you said, on Google, and I've got a little needs worksheet, just looking at, when you're feeling calm and stable and you're not going to be interrupted and you can let your mind wander and think freely, doing a few exercises on, okay, well, what are my core needs? And if we don't have a worksheet at hand, it's really as simple as thinking about, okay, literally, like, what do I need to feel happy and thriving? And just write down whatever comes up. I know, like for me, for example, it'll come down to feeling, like safe. I want to be warm. I want to be able to have a lot of freedom. I want to be able to be flexible. I want to be able to manage my own time to some extent. I want to be able to eat well, to exercise, and just write down everything that comes up. And then again, if you assume you don't have a worksheet or something, can you begin to draw out what different needs you're meeting through all of these different things? So for example, my need for, having flexibility and my need for being able to work online, like working remotely for me is a massive thing. It's huge. And that meets my core need for freedom, because I have a massive core need for freedom. And then that core need of freedom also connects to my core need of adventure. I have a need for adventure. Like I want to know that I can work from a different place every month if I wanted to, hypothetically. And I want to know that I can talk to different people. That's also one of my needs, to be interacting and socializing. That's a need for connection. So just getting curious around, like, based on all the things that you really love, what are the different needs that you're fulfilling there? And then if you have a partner, ask your partner to do the same, right?
Yeah.
Ask them to do the
I
same.
was just thinking that, past Steve would also object to this one and say, yeah, but there's an assumption baked in that then, okay, what am I going to get all of my needs 100% met? And I do think we sometimes we're approaching this, we can pendulum swing, and people think, well, then it's 100% about me getting everything. So that's not realistic either. Well, that's not the point. The point is the conversation. Yes. And if we can both articulate what we're wanting, then there's a much better shot
for sure
at meeting those needs,
and honestly,
than not.
Yeah. And life is literally one long journey of trying to get our needs met. I just literally, if we break it down, that's what it's like, what do we need money for? Safety and freedom and, maybe status or significance, whatever else people want it for. Like, why do we need a job? Like, same thing. Self-actualization. Everything we do in life is driven by our needs. And the more that we can know ourselves and really, not to be high achieving the language, but like to optimize our lives to be able to meet those and pair that with our partner. And this is why when I'm taking people through my 90-day program, I'm very much like, before you go out there looking for a partner or looking to build a connection, get to know your needs. Because there's no point building a connection with someone who doesn't want children, for example, or wants to be a digital nomad or whatever, and is completely at odds with your needs, which plenty of people do. And then they realize 10 years down the line and they're like, oh, how did I get here?